A mafia boss handed a homeless single mother his black card and walked away. 2 hours later, a transaction appeared on his phone. It wasn't designer clothes. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't a one-way ticket out of the city. It was something he couldn't ignore. And in that moment he knew there would be consequences, because in his world, trust was currency, and she'd just made a choice that would either confirm his father's ruthless teachings or shatter everything the Rossi family had built their empire on. 40-year-old Dante Rossi had stopped believing in redemption the day he took his first life at 17. As the head of the Rossi crime family, one of Chicago's most powerful syndicates, he'd built an empire worth $6.4 billion through arms trafficking, money laundering, high-stakes gambling operations, and strategic investments in legitimate businesses that served as fronts. His penthouse overlooked Lake Michigan from the 80th floor of a luxury building his family owned through shell corporations. The windows were bulletproof. The art on his walls, Caravaggio, Rembrandt, had been acquired through methods that would never appear in any auction house records. He owned restaurants, construction companies, and nightclubs across 3 states. His Patek Philippe watch cost more than most people earned in 5 years. Yet every night he fell asleep with a gun under his pillow, wondering if trust was just another word for weakness. His late father, Salvatore Rossi, a man who'd ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron fist for 30 years, had drilled one lesson into Dante since childhood. Trust is the fastest way to a grave, Figlio. The desperate are the most dangerous. Give them an inch and they'll take everything, then put a bullet in your back while smiling. Compassion is for priests and fools. We are neither. Dante had carried that gospel like scripture for 40 years. Every business deal required leverage. Every alliance demanded insurance. Every act of generosity came with strings attached, favors owed, debts collected, loyalty purchased with fear. He'd never once looked poverty in the face and simply helped. Not without contracts. Not without collateral. Not without someone owing him something in return. But that February morning, something cracked in the ice around his chest. He was late for a meeting with his underboss about a shipment coming through the port of Chicago. $15 million in untraceable weapons that needed to disappear into the right hands. His driver Marco had the black Mercedes idling at the curb. His consigliere Vincent walked 3 steps behind, phone pressed to his ear, coordinating security details. Dante wore a charcoal Brioni suit that cost $18,000. His leather briefcase contained contracts that could make or break criminal enterprises across the Midwest. His phone buzzed relentlessly, capos, soldiers, associates, politicians on his payroll, all demanding pieces of his shrinking attention. Then he saw her. Huddled against the brick wall near the Red Line entrance at State and Lake sat a woman, maybe early 30s, with exhaustion carved into every line of her face. A little girl no older than 5, slept curled in her lap, wrapped in a donated coat 3 sizes too large. The woman's arms were locked around the child like a fortress built from flesh, bone, and desperate love. A piece of torn cardboard rested beside them. Black marker, shaky letters. Single MO. Lost everything. Just trying to keep my daughter safe. Anything helps. God bless. Dante stopped walking so abruptly that Vincent nearly crashed into him. Don Rossi, Vincent said urgently, glancing around nervously. The meeting. We're already 10 minutes behind, and Carmine doesn't like to be kept waiting. Wait at the car, Dante said, his voice distant, disconnected from the urgency around him. Vincent's eyes widened. In 20 years of service, he'd never heard his boss sound like that. Don Rossi, is there a problem? Should I call? The car, Vincent. Now. Vincent retreated, exchanging confused glances with Marco, both men's hands instinctively moving closer to the weapons concealed beneath their jackets. Dante approached slowly, expensive shoes clicking against grimy subway tile, unsure why his body moved when every instinct screamed to keep walking. Homeless people were everywhere in Chicago. This wasn't special. This wasn't different. This was just another casualty of a system he'd helped corrupt. Except something about her stopped him cold. When the woman looked up, there was no performance in her eyes. No rehearsed desperation or practiced plea for sympathy. Just bone-deep exhaustion, the kind that settles into marrow after months of carrying impossible weight alone. Her lips were chapped from winter wind. Her fingernails were clean but ragged. She'd given up on vanity but not on dignity. I'm sorry, she said immediately, voice rough from cold and disuse. We're not bothering anyone. We can move if we need to. Her apology for existing hit Dante harder than any betrayal in his violent career ever had. "What's your name?" he asked, kneeling down despite the protests of his expensive suit touching filthy subway floor. She blinked, surprised that Danger wore a suit that tailored. "Sophia," she said quietly. "Sophia Moretti." Moretti. Italian. Like him. Something twisted in his chest. "And your daughter?" The woman's arms instinctively tightened around the sleeping child. Protective. Primal. "Her name is Gabriella. She just turned 5 last month." Dante studied Sophia's face. Intelligence lived behind that exhaustion. Education in the careful way she spoke. This wasn't someone born into poverty. This was someone who'd fallen from somewhere higher and couldn't find footing on the way down. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. Shame flickered across Sophia's features like a match struck in darkness. 6 months. We were staying with my sister until September, but she... Sophia's voice broke. "She died. Overdose. After that, we had nowhere to go. We've been rotating between here and the shelter on Roosevelt when they have space." 6 months. A 5-year-old child sleeping on subway floors for 6 months while thousands of people walked past every single day. Vincent cleared his throat impatiently from across the platform, tapping his watch. Dante raised one hand without looking, silencing him. His father's voice echoed in his skull. "The desperate will bleed you dry and smile while doing it. They're parasites looking for hosts, Dante. Never forget that." Maybe it was time to test that theory himself. To prove once and for all whether his father had been right, or whether Dante had spent 40 years believing a lie that protected his empire but poisoned his soul. Dante reached into his jacket, a movement that made Sophia flinch instinctively, probably expecting violence, and pulled out his wallet. Sophia's eyes widened slightly, probably expecting a few bills if she was lucky. Maybe $20. Maybe 50 if the universe felt generous. Instead, Dante pulled out a sleek black credit card. Matte finish. Raised platinum numbers. No name on it, just numbers. Completely untraceable. No spending limit. No restrictions. The kind of card that existed in a world most people would never touch. Sophia stared at it like he'd pulled out a weapon. "Take it," Dante said, holding the card between them like a bridge between two different worlds. I don't understand," Sophia stammered, pulling Gabriella closer as if the card itself might hurt them. "It's yours for 48 hours, Dante explained, his voice steady despite the chaos of doubt screaming inside his head. "Buy whatever you want. No limits. No questions. No conditions." Sophia's hands began to tremble. "Sir, this has to be some kind of trap. People like you don't just hand out credit cards to people like me. People like you." She had no idea who he was. No idea that the man kneeling before her had ordered executions over dinner, had built an empire on blood and fear, had become exactly what his father had molded him to be. "I want to see something," Dante said. And for the first time in decades he spoke complete truth. "I want to see what someone with nothing does when given everything. I want to test something my father taught me. Prove him right or prove him wrong." He pressed the card into her palm. Her fingers were ice cold, rough from exposure, shaking like leaves in a violent storm. "Why me?" Sophia whispered, tears pooling in eyes that had cried themselves empty months ago. Dante looked at Gabriella, sleeping peacefully despite the cold, despite the noise, despite the absolute instability of her entire world. He thought about his own childhood, private schools and bodyguards, and learning to shoot before he learned algebra, every need met with violence or money or both. This child had nothing except a mother who refused to let go. "Because your last name is Moretti," Dante said quietly. "Because you're Italian like me. Because I'm tired of believing the worst about people. Prove my father right or prove him wrong. Either way, I'll finally know the truth." Sophia closed her fingers around the card slowly, like someone touching fire for the first time and expecting to be burned. 48 hours, Dante repeated, standing up. His knees ached from kneeling on frozen tile. "Spend whatever you want. There's no pin. Just sign any name you want. I'll find you here tomorrow evening. Same time. Same place." Vincent looked physically ill, already calculating the risk assessment, probably mentally drafting contingency plans if this went sideways. "Don Rossi," he said carefully, using the title in public making Sophia's eyes widen with recognition and fear. "This is highly irregular. We should at least establish parameters. Security protocols." "No parameters," Dante said firmly, his eyes still locked on Sophia. No protocols. Just trust. The word felt foreign in his mouth. Trust. In his world, trust got you killed. Sophia opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She just clutched the card like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning, her entire body shaking with emotions Dante couldn't begin to name. As he walked away, his father's voice whispered warnings. She'll drain your account. She'll disappear into the night. You're a fool, Dante. A sentimental, naive fool who just signed his own death warrant. But another voice, quieter, more fragile, one that sounded like his mother before the cancer took her, whispered something different. What if she doesn't? Dante didn't sleep that night. His penthouse felt cavernous and cold despite the heating system that cost more than a luxury car. He stood at the bulletproof window, staring at Chicago's glittering skyline, wondering if somewhere down there Sophia and Gabriella were finally warm for the first time in months. He pulled out his phone, opened the encrypted banking app. The credit card was linked to one of his personal offshore accounts. Untraceable, unlimited, completely off the books. He could track every transaction in real time. Every purchase. Every location. Every choice she made. 4 hours, nothing. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m. 2 a.m. 3 a.m. Still nothing. Why wasn't she spending? Was she afraid? Did she think it was a trap? Or worse, was she planning something big? Waiting for stores to open, preparing to maximize every possible dollar before he could cancel the card? His phone rang. Vincent. Don Rossi, I've got eyes on the woman. She hasn't moved from the subway station. She's just sitting there, staring at the card. Pull your guys back, Dante ordered. Give her space. Boss, with all due respect, this is a security risk. We don't know who she is, who she's connected to. I said pull back, Vincent. That's an order. Silence. Then, yes, Don Rossi. At 6:12 a.m. his phone buzzed. Transaction, $47.23. Location, Walgreens, South Loop. Dante's pulse spiked. He clicked for details, but the system only showed the amount, not what was purchased. Just numbers. Then another notification. Transaction, $68.91. Location, Target State Street. Then another. Transaction, $22.15. Location, Dunkin' Donuts. His chest tightened. Not with anger but with something stranger. Anticipation. She was spending, yes, but carefully. Modestly. These weren't the transactions of someone drunk on sudden wealth. These were the purchases of someone desperately practical. By 9:30 a.m., Dante couldn't wait anymore. He called Marco. Bring the car around. Where to, boss? State and Lake. Vincent's voice crackled over the speaker. Don Rossi, you have a meeting with the Northside crew in 40 minutes. They're expecting. Cancel it, Dante said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Reschedule. I don't care when. Handle it. Boss, they're not going to like. Then they can take it up with me personally, Dante said, his voice dropping to the dangerous register that ended conversations. Drive, Marco. When he reached the Red Line entrance, Sophia was exactly where he'd left her. But everything else had changed. Gabriella was awake now, sitting beside her mother, wearing a brand new pink winter coat with a fur-lined hood. Her hair had been washed, pulled back with butterfly clips. She clutched a new teddy bear, hugging it like treasure while she colored in a fresh coloring book with crayons that still smelled like the package. Sophia saw Dante approaching and immediately stood up, the credit card already in her trembling hand. I was going to return it, she said quickly, panic edging her voice. I promise I was. I just needed to get a few things first. Basic things. Necessary things. Keep it, Dante said gently, raising both hands in a gesture his soldiers would have found shocking. You still have over 36 hours left. Sophia's shoulders sagged with something between relief and confusion. I don't understand you. That makes two of us, Dante admitted. He glanced at Gabriella, who was watching him with wide, curious brown eyes. You bought her a coat. She was freezing, Sophia said simply, as if that explained everything. And perhaps it did. Perhaps that was the only explanation that mattered. Dante knelt down to Gabriella's level, careful not to startle her. That's a nice bear. What's her name? Gabriella hugged the toy tighter, shy but smiling. Rosa, she whispered. Like my nana who's in heaven. Rosa. His mother's name. Something cracked in Dante's chest. That's a beautiful name, he said softly, his throat tight for reasons he couldn't explain. He looked up at Sophia. What else did you buy? Sophia hesitated, then slowly pulled 2 crumpled receipts from her pocket and handed them over like evidence in a trial she was certain to lose. Dante scanned the first receipt. Children's winter coat, size 5, children's waterproof boots thermal socks, 4-pack, children's underwear, pack of 7, teddy bear coloring books and crayons, children's multivitamins, Band-Aids and Neosporin, children's cold medicine, toothbrushes and toothpaste. His throat tightened. Every single item was for Gabriella. Not one thing for herself. The second receipt was from a grocery store. Bread, peanut butter, granola bars, apples, juice boxes, string cheese, crackers, milk. And at the bottom, something that made Dante's breath catch. Pacific Garden Mission donation. $200. He looked up sharply. You donated money? Sophia's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The mission on South State. They've given us meals when we had nothing. They're always running out of supplies, always turning people away. I thought, if I had extra, even just for 2 days, maybe I could help them help someone else. Someone else. Dante repeated, his voice barely functional. You're homeless. You've been sleeping on subway floors for 6 months. And you gave money to help other people? There are families there with babies, Sophia said quietly. With teenagers. With elderly people who have nowhere to go. Some of them have it so much worse than we do. I know what it's like to need help and have no one turn around. If I could give back even a little, even for 1 day, I had to. Dante stared at the receipts. His father's voice was completely silent now, obliterated by the truth printed on thermal paper. This woman who had every reason to be selfish, who had every justification to think only of herself and her daughter, had spent a mafia boss's money on necessities, medicine, and charity. Not drugs. Not alcohol. Not designer clothes or jewelry or anything remotely self-indulgent. Just survival. Just kindness. Just love. You didn't buy anything for yourself, Dante said, his voice strained. Not a single thing. Sophia shook her head. Gabriella comes first. She always comes first. I can manage. I've managed this long. But she deserves better. She deserves to be warm, to be safe, to be a child. Dante looked at Gabriella, carefully coloring a picture of a butterfly with fierce concentration. Rosa the bear tucked protectively under her arm. A child who'd spent 5 years learning that the world was cold and unstable, but who still smiled, still colored, still hoped. For the first time in his life, Dante Rossi, a man who'd built an empire on fear, violence, and ruthless calculation, felt genuinely small. Not in power. Not in wealth. But in character. In humanity. In basic human decency. This homeless single mother had more grace in her roughened fingertips than he'd cultivated in 40 years of family business. Come with me, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before his brain could catch up. Sophia blinked. What? Both of you. Come with me. Please. Fear flickered in her eyes. Where? Somewhere warm, Dante said, his voice breaking slightly. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can finally stop running. Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks. She looked at her daughter, then at the man kneeling before them, and for the first time in 6 months, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, not everyone in the world was cruel. Dante took them to the Langham first, not his penthouse. That felt too invasive, too much like bringing prey into a predator's den. Instead, he booked the presidential suite overlooking the Chicago River with 3 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and windows that let in actual sunlight instead of fluorescent subway glare. Marco and Vincent exchanged looks when Dante walked through the lobby with a homeless woman and child, but one glance from their boss silenced any questions. Sophia stood in the doorway of the suite, frozen, unable to cross the threshold. It's okay, Dante said gently in a voice his soldiers had never heard him use. This is yours for as long as you need it. No conditions. No expectations. Just safety. Gabriella, unburdened by adult knowledge of who Dante Rossi really was, ran inside immediately, her new boots squeaking on polished marble. She touched everything with wonder, the velvet couch, the heavy curtains, the bowl of fresh fruit on the granite counter. Mama, look. Gabriella called, pointing at the bathroom. There's a bathtub. A really, really big one like in the princess movies. Sophia finally stepped inside, moving like someone walking through a dream that might shatter at any moment. She set down the plastic bag that held everything she owned, literally everything that remained of her previous life, and turned to Dante with tears streaming freely. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice fracturing. Why are you doing this? What do you want from us? In his world, that question always had an answer. Money. Loyalty. Silence. Favors. Debts. Everything came with a price. But standing there, watching a mother see safety for the first time in months, He realized he didn't want anything. He just wanted to give. You reminded me what power is actually for, he said quietly. I'd forgotten. Or maybe I never knew. Sophia walked over to where Gabriella was pressing buttons on the TV remote, delighted by every channel that appeared. She knelt down and wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her like she'd been afraid to hold her too tightly before, as if hope itself might break. You need to rest, Dante said, his voice thick. Order room service. Take a real bath. Sleep in an actual bed. I'll come back tomorrow morning. We'll figure out the next steps then. Next steps? Sophia asked, confusion and fear mixing in her expression. Housing. Employment. School for Gabriella. Healthcare. Childcare. Stability. Dante listed them like a business plan because that's what his brain did. It solved problems systematically. None of this has to be temporary. Unless you want it to be. Sophia stared at him like he'd just spoken a language she'd forgotten existed. You're serious. Completely. You're? She hesitated, clearly trying to find words that wouldn't offend a man she suspected was dangerous. You're someone important. Someone powerful. We're nobody. We're just two people who got unlucky and couldn't climb back out. You were nobody, Dante corrected gently. Now you're someone I care about. Now you matter. Now you have someone who won't let you fall again. Sophia opened her mouth to argue, to protest, to explain all the reasons this couldn't be real. But exhaustion won. 6 months of hypervigilance and fear and sleeping with one eye open came crashing down. She sank onto the couch, her body folding like someone who'd been holding up the sky and could finally let it rest on something stronger. Thank you, she whispered, and the words carried the weight of 6 months of suffering compressed into 2 syllables. Dante nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Get some rest, Sophia. You're safe now. Both of you. As he left the suite, he heard Gabriella's delighted laughter echoing behind him. And Dante Rossi realized he was smiling, not the cold, calculated smile he used to intimidate rivals, but something genuine, something human, something his face had almost forgotten how to do. That night, Dante made phone calls. Not to his capos or his lawyers or his money launderers, but to people who actually helped. Social workers, housing advocates, job placement specialists, education coordinators. He used his name, his real name, not his title, not as a weapon, but as a key to open doors that had been slammed in Sophia's face for months. Vincent watched from across the office, confused and increasingly concerned. Boss, he said carefully, with all due respect, this is unusual. The family might have questions about. Let them ask, Dante said, his eyes never leaving his phone screen. This is personal, Vincent. Not family business. But she's a stranger. We don't know her connections, her background. I know enough, Dante said firmly. She's a good mother. That's all I need to know. By morning he had options. Real, tangible, sustainable options. He returned to the Langham at 9 a.m., carrying coffee from Sophia's favorite. He'd noticed the Dunkin' receipt, and a bag of fresh pastries from a bakery Gabriella would love. When Sophia opened the door, she looked transformed. Not in appearance, she still wore the same worn clothes, but in posture, in the way she stood straighter, in the way her eyes held something other than perpetual fear. Gabriella was drawing at the table, humming a song about butterflies. Rosa sat proudly beside her, overseeing the artwork. Morning, Dante said, handing Sophia the coffee. She took it with both hands, inhaling the steam like a memory she'd thought was lost forever. Real coffee. From an actual coffee shop. I forgot what that was like. They sat together while Gabriella colored and Dante laid out the plan. A 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park near good schools. Paid in full for the first year through one of his legitimate real estate holdings. Job training programs matched to her skills. Sophia had been a paralegal before her sister died and her life collapsed. Healthcare coverage through one of his legitimate businesses. Gabriella enrolled in kindergarten at a public school with excellent ratings and a before and after care program. Sophia listened in stunned silence, tears running down her face, dripping into coffee that had grown cold while Dante talked. This isn't charity, Dante clarified, echoing what he'd been telling himself all night. It's an investment. You're intelligent, capable, and resilient. You just need a foundation to rebuild from. A place to stand so you can start climbing again. I don't know how to repay you, Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. You already did, Dante replied. You showed me that goodness still exists in people. That desperation doesn't automatically create monsters. That my father was wrong about everything that actually matters. Sophia shook her head, more tears falling. I just bought what Gabriella needed. Exactly, Dante said. You had unlimited wealth for 48 hours and you chose love over greed. Do you have any idea how rare that is? In my world, people kill for a fraction of what I gave you. And you spent it on your daughter and donated to charity. That's not just good. That's extraordinary. Sophia looked at her daughter, carefully coloring inside the lines of a flower, her small tongue poking out in concentration. She's all I have. She's all that matters. Everything I do, every choice I make, it's all for her. I know, Dante said softly. I saw it in those receipts. I saw it in that donation to the mission. You could have taken everything but you gave anyway. That's not just survival. That's humanity. And I'd forgotten what that looked like. 3 weeks later, Sophia and Gabriella moved into their new apartment. 2 bedrooms on the 3rd floor of a renovated brownstone in Lincoln Park with a small park across the street. It wasn't luxury, updated but modest, safe but unpretentious, but it was theirs. Walls that didn't move. A door that locked from the inside. Heat that worked. Windows that let in light without letting in wind. Dante helped them move in, carrying boxes, assembling furniture, laughing when Gabriella insisted on supervising by placing Rosa on every flat surface and declaring it decorated. She's very particular about interior design, Sophia joked, watching her daughter arrange stuffed animals with the seriousness of an architect. Dante didn't mind. For the first time in years he felt useful. Not powerful. Not feared. Just useful. Just present. Just human. Vincent and Marco watched from the doorway, completely baffled by their boss in jeans and a t-shirt, screwing together an IKEA dresser while a 5-year-old gave him instructions. Is this real life? Marco whispered. Shut up and help him with that bookshelf, Vincent muttered back, shaking his head. That evening, after Gabriella fell asleep in her new bed, her very first bed that wasn't a couch or a floor or someone else's charity, Sophia and Dante stood in the small living room, exhaustion and gratitude hanging thick between them. I start the paralegal training program next Monday, Sophia said. At Northwestern. Full scholarship. The director said with my background I could have my certification within 6 months. Stable work. Good benefits. A real career. You're going to be incredible at it, Dante said, and he meant it. Sophia looked around the apartment, her eyes glistening in the lamplight. I keep waiting to wake up back at the subway station. To realize this was all some elaborate dream I had while freezing on concrete. It's real, Dante assured her. It's yours. No one can take it away. I'll make sure of that. The way he said it, with the quiet certainty of a man who controlled half of Chicago's underworld, sent a shiver down Sophia's spine. Not from fear but from understanding. She knew now, or at least suspected, exactly who Dante Rossi was. You're not what I expected, she said carefully. What did you expect? When I heard your name, when your friend called you Don Rossi, that first day, I expected someone cold, cruel, dangerous. I am all of those things, Dante admitted. You changed nothing about who I am in my world. But you reminded me that I don't have to be only that. That I can choose to be something else at least sometimes, at least for the people who matter. Sophia turned to face him, her voice breaking around the edges. Why did you choose us? Out of all the people you could have helped, out of everyone in the city who's struggling, why me and Gabriella? Dante had thought about that question every day since that February afternoon at the subway station. He'd analyzed it like a strategic decision, broken it down into logical components. But the truth was simpler and more complicated than logic. Because you looked at your daughter the way my mother used to look at me, he said quietly, before the cancer took her, before my father turned completely cold and taught me that compassion was weakness. You looked at Gabriella like nothing else in the world existed. Like you'd burn down the universe to keep her safe. And I realized I'd spent 40 years believing people like you didn't exist anymore. Sophia wiped her eyes. You gave us a future. No, Dante said. You already had a future. You were already fighting for it every single day. I just removed some obstacles. You did the hard part. You survived. You kept Gabriella safe. You stayed good when the world gave you every reason to be bitter. That's all you. I just cleared the path. They stood in comfortable silence, the apartment settling around them with creaks and hums that sounded like peace. Gabriella's soft breathing drifted from the bedroom. Traffic hummed distantly outside. The radiator clicked on, flooding the space with warmth. For the first time in 6 months, Sophia looked relaxed. And for the first time in 40 years, Dante felt like his life had actual purpose beyond power and profit. Months passed. Sophia completed her training program with honors. Landed a position at a prestigious law firm downtown with full benefits and regular hours. Estate planning and contract law, exactly what she'd been training for. Gabriella thrived in kindergarten, making friends, bringing home artwork, no longer carrying the weight of homelessness in her small shoulders. Dante visited often. Not as a Don checking on an asset but as a friend. Someone who attended Gabriella's school play where she played a flower in the spring pageant. Someone who helped Sophia navigate landlord issues when the heating broke. Someone who showed up on difficult days and didn't need to be asked. His crew noticed the change. Whispered about it. Wondered if their boss was going soft. One evening, Carmine, his most ruthless capo, asked him directly over drinks. "Boss, people are talking. They're saying you've got a soft spot now. That you're distracted. Some of the younger guys are wondering if..." "If what?" Dante asked, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that preceded violence. Carmine swallowed hard. "If you're still, still the man we follow." Dante set down his glass slowly. "Let me be very clear, Carmine. What I do with Sophia and Gabriella has nothing to do with how I run this family. Anyone who thinks compassion makes me weak is welcome to test that theory. Personally..." The room went silent. "But understand this," Dante continued, his voice softening slightly. "I spent 40 years believing my father's gospel. That trust is weakness. That the desperate are dangerous. That compassion is for fools. And you know what I learned? He was wrong. Dead wrong. And I'll be damned if I waste another 40 years repeating his mistakes." He looked around the table at his most trusted men. "This family will continue exactly as it has. We protect our interests. We handle our business. We take care of our own. But I'm expanding what our own means. And if anyone has a problem with that, speak now." Silence. "Good," Dante said, picking up his glass. "Now let's talk about the shipment coming through Milwaukee." Later, Vincent pulled him aside. "That was risky, boss. Showing that kind of vulnerability." "It wasn't vulnerability," Dante corrected. "It was honesty. There's a difference. My father ruled through fear alone. And you know what? He died alone, paranoid, with more enemies than friends. I'm not making that mistake." "So what are you doing?" Dante smiled. "I'm learning that power without purpose is just noise. And I finally found my purpose." 1 year later, Dante stood in an unmarked building in the South Loop, one of his legitimate holdings that he'd converted into something new, something that would have made his father turn in his grave. The Rosa Rossi Foundation for Family Stability. Named after his mother. Dedicated to comprehensive support for single parents facing homelessness, emergency housing, job training, childcare, healthcare, education support. No applications. No bureaucracy. No degrading processes. Just help extended with dignity to people who'd been failed by every other system. And sitting in the front row at the private opening ceremony, wearing a simple blue dress she'd bought with her own paycheck, holding Gabriella's hand, was Sophia Moretti. No longer homeless. No longer desperate. No longer invisible. Just a mother who'd survived hell and found her footing on the other side. Dante had kept the opening small, just his inner circle, a few trusted allies, and the people who mattered most. "My mother died when I was 12, he told the small gathering. "Cancer. Before she went, she made me promise something. She said, 'Dante, don't let this life turn you into stone. Don't let your father's lessons erase your heart.' I broke that promise for 28 years. He looked directly at Sophia. Until someone reminded me what it meant to keep it." After the brief ceremony, he found Sophia and Gabriella outside near the small courtyard he'd had built behind the building. "You did it," Sophia said, tears streaming down her face. "You're really doing this. You're going to help so many families." "We're doing this," Dante corrected. "I want you on the foundation board. I want your voice, your perspective, your experience. I need someone who's been there. Someone who understands what it's really like." Sophia looked shocked. "Me? On a board?" "Dante, I don't have any experience with..." "You have the only experience that matters," Dante interrupted. "You survived. You stayed good. You know exactly what families need because you needed it. You're perfect for this." Gabriella tugged on Dante's sleeve. "Mr. Dante, does this mean more people will get homes like we did?" Dante knelt down to her level, now 6 years old, thriving, no longer the frightened child sleeping on subway floors. "Yes, Piccola. Lots of families. Because your mama reminded me what helping actually means." Gabriella smiled, then wrapped her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. "You're like family now, right, Mama?" Sophia wiped her eyes, nodding. Right, amore? He's family. Dante felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen solid for 3 decades. His father had taught him that trust was weakness, that kindness was naive, that the poor would destroy him. But Sophia had taught him something different, something true. That power without compassion is just tyranny. That wealth without purpose is just numbers. That the strongest thing a person can do isn't control others, it's choosing to help them stand. Late that night, after everyone had left, Dante and Sophia sat in his office at the Foundation, a room that used to warehouse illegal weapons, now filled with filing cabinets of applications and hope. I need to tell you something, Dante said quietly. Sophia looked at him, concern flickering in her eyes. Okay. You know who I am. What I am. You're not stupid, Sophia. You've known for months. She nodded slowly. I suspected. Then I was certain. Does it matter? It should, Dante said. It should terrify you. It should make you take Gabriella and run as far away from me as possible. But it doesn't, Sophia said simply. You know why? Why? Because I've seen both sides of you. I've seen the man who controls half this city with fear. But I've also seen the man who assembles IKEA furniture at midnight because a 5-year-old wants her bookshelf just right. I've seen the man who remembers my coffee order, who shows up to kindergarten plays, who created this foundation not for publicity or tax breaks, but because he actually gives a damn. She reached across the desk and took his hand. You're not your father, Dante. You're not just what you were raised to be. You're also the man who saw a homeless woman and her daughter and chose compassion over cynicism. That's the man I know. That's the man Gabriella trusts. That's the man I... She stopped, her cheeks flushing. What? Dante asked softly. That's the man I'm grateful to call family, Sophia finished, though they both knew that wasn't quite what she'd been about to say. Dante squeezed her hand, his throat tight with emotions he'd spent 4 decades learning to suppress. My world is dangerous, Sophia. People who get close to me, bad things happen to them. Bad things already happened to me, Sophia said. I lost my sister. I lost my home. I slept on subway floors with my daughter for 6 months. And then you happened. And everything changed. I'm not afraid of your world, Dante. I'm only afraid of going back to mine. They sat in silence, hands intertwined, 2 people from completely different worlds who'd found common ground in the most unexpected way. Thank you, Dante said finally. For trusting me. For seeing past what I am to who I'm trying to become. Thank you, Sophia replied, for seeing me at all. For not just walking past. For choosing to stop. 2 years after that February afternoon, Dante stood at the Red Line entrance at State and Lake. It was nearly midnight, mostly deserted except for a few stragglers. He walked to the spot where he'd first seen Sophia and Gabriella. The brick wall was still there. The subway entrance unchanged. But everything else was different. He knelt down, touching the cold concrete where a mother had once held her daughter through the worst night of their lives. Vincent approached from behind. Boss, the car's waiting. You sure you want to be here? This neighborhood at night. I'm fine, Vincent, Dante said quietly, not looking up. I just needed to remember. Remember what? The moment everything changed. He pulled out his wallet, removed the black credit card. The same one he'd given Sophia 2 years ago, the one she'd returned months later, the one he'd kept in his wallet ever since as a reminder. My father taught me that compassion was weakness, Dante said, still staring at the card. That trust would get me killed. That the desperate would destroy me. And? Vincent asked carefully. And he was wrong about everything. Dante stood up, slipping the card back into his wallet. The desperate don't destroy you, Vincent. They remind you what it means to be human. They show you what you've forgotten. They save you if you let them. He turned to his consigliera. That foundation? It's not a side project. It's not PR. It's the most important thing I've ever built. More important than our territories. More important than our profit margins. More important than my father's legacy. Vincent nodded slowly. The family's adapting, boss. Some of the guys are even volunteering at the foundation. Carmine's been helping families find jobs through our construction companies. Legitimate jobs. Dante smiled. My father would lose his mind if he could see this. Is that a bad thing? No, Dante said. It's the best thing I've ever done. As they walked back to the car, Dante thought about Sophia, now the Foundation's Director of Family Services, using her legal background to help hundreds of families navigate the system. About Gabriella, now 7 years old, thriving in school, with no memory of those 6 months on the subway except the vague recollection of when we were having an adventure. About the credit card in his wallet that had started all of this. The test he'd designed for Sofia had actually been a test for himself. And he'd finally miraculously passed. The Rosa Rossi Foundation for Family Stability has helped over 1,500 families in its first 2 years. Sofia Moretti serves as Director of Family Services and shares her story at community centers, churches, and shelters across Chicago. Gabriella is now 7 years old, an honor student, and wants to be a lawyer, like Mama and Mr. Dante's friends. Dante Rossi still carries the black credit card in his wallet. He looks at it every time he makes a major decision. It reminds him that power is meaningless without compassion. And that sometimes, the bravest thing a dangerous man can do is choose to be kind. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more Mafia stories that show the humanity behind the power. Like and share this with your family. And remember, even the darkest empires can choose to bring light. See you on the next one.